The sleek diplomatic shuttle, an elegant vessel of polished alloy and reinforced titanium, drifted steadily through the velvety void of space. Its engines, humming at a low, constant frequency, propelled it across the silent gulf toward the orbiting silhouette of Xyra, a planet whose twin golden suns illuminated its swirling atmosphere in soft, gilded hues. Rarely had a planet glimmered so vividly, a tapestry of indigo oceans and gleaming silver deserts, etched with faint lines hinting at bustling alien cities beneath the swirling cloud canopies. Inside the shuttle, reclining upon a seat upholstered in smooth burgundy leather, sat Ethan Drake, newly appointed ambassador from Earth, his sharp gray eyes bright with anticipation. He was a man who bristled at the confines of bureaucracy, who believed that honest discourse and heartfelt engagement broke more barriers than official decrees ever could. His stance, tall and confident, revealed a man unafraid of alien horizons. Approaching Xyros' prime spaceport, the AI pilot intoned, its synthesized voice as smooth as a gentle lullaby. Drake allowed himself a slight, humor-tinged smirk. "Ambassador Drake," he repeated under his breath. Still not used to that title. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture that betrayed his lingering nerves. "Here we go," he said quietly, steeling himself for the world that awaited him. As the craft penetrated Xyra's upper atmosphere, clouds parted with swirling grace, unveiling the city of Myralise, capital of Xyros. Towering spires of translucent crystal rose in tight clusters, their surfaces dancing with refracted sunlight. The city seemed alive with energy, pulsing with a hidden luminescence that shifted across the color spectrum, an organic kaleidoscope set against the planet's gentle sky. Flocks of winged creatures glided overhead, their silhouettes melding with gilded beams of sunlight. With a final hiss of pressured air, the shuttle's landing gear met the meticulously maintained landing platform. The ramp extended slowly, exhaling a faint mist into the fragrant alien breeze. A hush stretched over the grounds. Xyrians, known throughout the galaxy for their towering statures and bioluminescent markings, stood gathered in disciplined rows, their violet skin shimmering like living amethyst, their eyes reflecting various metallic shades. As Ethan Drake stepped forward, the foreign air embracing him in a gentle but heady kiss, he spotted the regal form of High Counselor Varek. Tall even by Xyrian standards, Varek's presence demanded both respect and caution, as his intricate markings glowed with a commanding clarity. "Ambassador Drake," Varek greeted, his low voice resonating in the air. He spoke in precise standard, a testament to his political station. "On behalf of the Xyrian Council, I bid you welcome to Xyros." Drake inclined his head, mindful of the local custom that direct eye contact might be taken as a challenge. "The pleasure, Counselor, is all mine," he replied, carefully modulating his tone. "I trust our discussions will bring about a new era of friendship between our peoples." The High Counselor nodded once, a slight curve to his lips. Then, turning on his heel, he gestured for Drake to follow him across the vast spaceport. In the spaceport's main concourse, the opalescent floor glowed beneath every footstep, casting twinkling reflections upon the walls. Streams of Xyrian citizens passed by with fluid grace, some pausing to observe the tall, broad-shouldered human who walked in the High Counselor's esteemed company. Whispers passed among them, though none too loudly, for the Xyrian culture valued discretion in their public gatherings. As Drake turned to observe a particularly grand crystal sculpture, shimmering with an internal light that ebbed and surged like an ocean's tide, a sudden commotion caught his attention near one of the archways. A cluster of Xyrian guards, clad in elegantly designed armor with swirling patterns, had surrounded an individual. That individual, taller than the rest, bore shimmering, pale violet skin, intricately designed bioluminescent markings, unlike the uniform patterns displayed by the guards, and silver eyes that seemed to glow with an inner determination. "Who is that?" Drake asked softly, leaning closer to High Counselor Varek. Varek's features tightened, and his luminous markings flickered with a hint of irritation. "That," he rumbled, "is Lyara, daughter of Counselor Xyr. She is difficult," he finished tactfully, though there was a distinct undercurrent of tension. Drake tilted his head, observing the way Lyara moved, proud and unbowed. gazing at her would-be captors with surprising boldness. From the graceful extension of her limbs to the shifting, opalescent design that rippled across her tall frame, she appeared almost mythic, a goddess from some ancient cosmic legend. Despite his training and mindful of protocol, Drake found himself struggling to look away. "Difficult in what manner?" he asked, forcing his gaze to remain on Varek. "She advocates for radical changes in our centuries-old traditions," Varek replied, leading Drake away, hoping to divert his attention. "Her father, though an esteemed member of our council, finds her impetuous, dangerous. She disregards the caution that has guided our people's foreign relations for eons." Drake allowed himself a tight smile. "She sounds passionate," he offered. Varek's stiff nod was accompanied by a frown. "Be wary of tangling yourself in Xyrian politics, Ambassador. We prefer order to chaos." Drake said nothing further, and as they moved on, the echoes of the distant commotion drifted away behind them. Yet, in the back of Drake's mind, a spark of curiosity had taken hold. He could not forget the proud tilt of Lyara's chin, her determined expression, or the quiet ferocity in her eyes. He suspected their paths were destined to cross again. The days that followed were a whirlwind of official functions and diplomatic ceremonies. Within the crystalline halls of the council pavilion, Drake found himself seated at a long, curved table across from the Xyrian council, a circle of elders whose glowing skin markings revealed their many decades, if not centuries, of service to their people. Every conversation revolved around trade routes, shared technology, scientific endeavors, and the potential hazards of cultural interference. Xyrians, as a species, were older than humanity by countless millennia, their civilization nurtured across ages of slow progress and careful isolation. They possessed advanced crystalline structures that resonated with psychic energy, enabling them to accomplish feats that Earth's most brilliant engineers could scarcely imagine. Despite this formidable advancement, the Xyrians held to tradition with the fervor of an ancient order. Council debates stretched for hours, laden with protocol, subtle gestures, and nuanced forms of speech that left Drake occasionally overwhelmed. Each day, upon concluding their official sessions, he would retreat to his quarters within the pavilion and slip off his stiff ambassadorial attire with a weary sigh. During these gatherings, High Counselor Varek and Counselor Xyr were Drake's primary counterparts. Their questions sought to understand human nature, our capacity for war, for relentless growth, and our swift leaps in technology. Drake answered with honesty, for he believed that forging genuine alliances required trust, not half-truths. Now and then, however, during these stifling debates, Drake's thoughts drifted to Lyara. He recalled her piercing eyes and her stance of defiance in that spaceport corridor. Rumors of her unorthodox stances trickled through the council. Some whispered she had once visited an unauthorized outpost on Xyra's outer moon, leading a protest against certain archaic restrictions. Others claimed she had dared speak to the council using direct eye contact, a taboo for anyone except the most senior of Xyrian leaders. As days became weeks, Drake's frustration grew. He sensed that the council maintained a polite facade but nurtured no real intention of changing their long-standing policies. Yet he remained steadfast. Giving up would mean sabotage of everything Earth's delegation had worked for. Late one evening, returning from a particularly grueling session, Drake strolled through the pavilion's tranquil gardens. The locals referred to these gardens as the Oracle Groves, a network of bioluminescent flora that sparkled under the night sky. Across small reflecting pools, elegantly carved stepping stones bridged the water's surface, each stone glowing gently from within. He wandered alone, welcoming the crisp night air, letting the perfume of alien blooms ease his tension. The twin moons of Xyra arced overhead, silver discs that bathed the garden in a soft, ethereal radiance. Unbidden, his mind replayed the events of the day. The council's refusal to consider open trade routes, the simmering frustration in his own heart, the subtle condemnation in their voices when they referenced humanity's warlike past. He paused on a small footbridge, gazing down at the fish-like creatures that swam below, their scales glinting turquoise and gold. A gentle sound, like a trailing whisper or the flutter of a bird, drew his attention. He turned carefully, heart thudding in his chest. Standing at the edge of the footbridge, framed by the soft glow of luminescent flowers, was Lyara. She wore flowing robes of silken fabric that crisscrossed her tall body, the patterns in her skin radiant under the moonlight. Her silver eyes, deeper in hue than the moonbeams themselves, regarded him with curiosity and a hint of daring. "You're either the boldest ambassador I've encountered or the most reckless," she said, her voice low, carrying an undercurrent of warmth. "Strolling alone at this hour?" Drake felt an unusual flutter in his stomach. He straightened, mustering composure. "I wasn't aware your gardens posed a danger," he said, matching her conversational tone. "Should I worry about encountering a Xyrian in the shadows?" Liara's lips curved ever so slightly, revealing a subtle flash of amusement. "In my release, you won't find cutthroats and criminals lurking about," she replied. "But you'll find hidden watchers, especially for an off-world dignitary. A single unguarded moment might create a scandal." Drake offered a light shrug, stepping to the side so she could join him on the footbridge. "I've never been one to hide in my chambers," he admitted. "I prefer to see things for myself, to let the environment speak, rather than rely solely on official announcements." Lyara inclined her head. "We do not often welcome ambassadors who appreciate the subtlety of our ways," she said. "You're either naive or refreshingly honest." "Perhaps a bit of both," he murmured. He hesitated, unsure if he should broach the subject so soon, but his curiosity pushed him forward. "Why do they speak of you as if you're some kind of renegade?" A soft, rueful laugh escaped her lips. She leaned against the carved railing, towering above him by more than a head, her posture poised yet contemplative. "Because I speak words most Xyrians don't dare speak," she replied. "Our race has centuries of tradition that shaped our success, but also caged our hearts. We are free only within the limits our council sets. When one steps beyond them, eyes turn cold and threats linger." Drake studied her face, sensing a profound longing behind her words. "Change must be earned," he said gently. "Earth had its share of revolutions, of renegades and visionaries who fought against entrenched traditions. That is precisely why I want to learn from your people," she said, her voice gaining conviction. "We Xyrians can be too cautious. Our leaders fear the universe might swallow us if we step beyond our known territories. But look at you, venturing across the galaxy." He nodded. "And we, in turn, have often erred on the side of aggression, or we've grown too fast and too reckless. That has cost us dearly. Perhaps we can temper each other's extremes." She regarded him with an expression that glinted with something akin to admiration. "That," she said quietly, "is a perspective I have rarely heard spoken among my own kind." For a moment, silence enveloped them. The gentle croon of nocturnal creatures and the hush of the wind through the glowing foliage created a world apart from daily politics. The moonlight cast subtle reflections upon their faces, highlighting the slight tension around Drake's eyes and the faint, pulsating glow on Liara's cheeks. "I must depart soon," Lyara said at last, stepping back. "But if you wander here again tomorrow night, perhaps we might continue this conversation." Though her words came out measured, there was a furtive spark in her gaze, an invitation Drake was not inclined to refuse. "It would be my pleasure," he said, dipping his head in acknowledgement. She turned to go, her tall silhouette gliding gracefully over the stepping stones until she disappeared behind a curtain of weeping, luminescent vines. Left alone in the tranquil garden, Drake released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The night air seemed charged with the unspoken promise of more clandestine encounters. He knew, with an inexplicable certainty, that his life had irrevocably changed, as though one conversation beneath the Xyrian moons had planted a seed of destiny within his heart. Over the following weeks, official negotiations continued. Drake found the council's posture resolute, their reluctance ever present. Nonetheless, a subtle shift began to stir beneath the surface. Small gestures here, a softened stance there, hints of uncertain receptiveness in a few more progressive council members. It was in the evenings, however, that Drake discovered true solace. Hidden from the formalities of daily affairs, he and Lyara would meet in quiet corners of the sprawling palace complex, or among the lofty garden terraces overlooking the shimmering city. The more they spoke, the more they realized how alike their convictions were. She spoke to him of Xyra's storied past, legends of living crystals, grown in the planet's core, once worshipped as deities capable of shaping thought itself. She shared tales of ancient wars, once thought unthinkable in their pacifistic culture, yet which had occurred so long ago that few dared speak of them in present times. Drake, in turn, recounted Earth's tumultuous journey, of how human beings tore each other apart in countless conflicts, only to rise again with renewed commitment to unite, to expand beyond the boundaries of Earth and explore the cosmos. He told her of the United Earth Federation, formed after centuries of division, of the impetus that drove humankind to the stars. Beneath each conversation, an undercurrent of mutual intrigue pulsed, a gravitational force that pulled them closer, bridging the gulf of cultural differences and forging a bond that surprised them both. With each passing moment, their meeting was not merely a sharing of knowledge, but a blossoming connection born of curiosity, admiration, and the intangible spark of two souls recognizing each other in a vast universe. They were careful, for if the council discovered an unsanctioned bond between a human and a daughter of one of Xyra's most influential leaders, scandal would inevitably erupt. Lyara, in particular, had to tread with caution, for she was already under watch by more conservative elements of Xyrian leadership. Often, they stole fleeting glances in the midst of official gatherings. Lyara, dressed in regal attire beside her father, would catch Drake's gaze from across the chamber. In that instant, a clandestine warmth radiated between them, and Drake found himself emboldened, certain they were destined for more than a few secret trysts. But fate, as it often does, offered them little respite. Barely 3 months into Drake's ambassadorship, a crisis rattled Xyra. Rumors emerged that a separatist cell, composed of Xyrian traditionalists, had formed in the city's underbelly. Disgruntled by the council's slow drift toward forging new alliances, they desired a return to the most stringent form of isolationism. This group, known as the RHYX Coalition, believed that humans were harbingers of ruin, harping on ancient predictions that contact with too many alien races would lead to cosmic strife. One morning, their threat materialized in the form of sabotage. A remote observation tower at the far edge of my release was torn apart by an explosive device. Though casualties were few, the symbolic message rang loud and clear. They would resort to violence to deter the planet's acceptance of humankind. As the Council convened emergency sessions, Drake found his personal guard doubled by Earth's own security contingents. Yet he chafed at remaining locked away in the pavilion. He insisted on visiting the blast site to show solidarity and help investigate. His request was met with friction. High Counselor Varek cautioned that Drake's presence might fan the flames. Counselor Xyr, too, was uncertain, though not for the same reasons. "I cannot guarantee your safety there," he warned. But Drake remained resolute. "I came here to forge understanding," he insisted. "If I hide at the first sign of danger, what message does that send?" It was Lyara's subtle voice that turned the tide. During a private corridor conversation with her father, she stressed the importance of demonstrating unity and trust, even when threatened by extremists. Counselor Xyr yielded to her persuasion, albeit with reluctance, and the council grudgingly allowed Drake to view the site, provided he traveled with a Xyrian escort. Lyara joined him on the short flight to the blasted tower. For the first time in weeks, they were together in public view, though under professional pretenses. Tension rippled in the air, not merely from the devastation below, but from the many watchful eyes ensuring the pair's interactions remained strictly diplomatic. The observation tower had once served as a quiet sentinel on the city's outskirts. Now its crystal walls lay shattered, littering the ground in sharp, glistening shards. Black scorch marks marred the smooth surfaces, evidence of the explosive's vile power. Drake felt a wave of sorrow and anger churn in his gut. He saw Xyrian rescue workers carefully combing through the wreckage, using sensor devices to detect further hidden charges. Several civilians, their skin dull with shock and grief, huddled nearby. Lyara's face was carved with fury as she surveyed the damage. The luminescent patterns on her skin pulsed in agitation, her stance taut with indignation. "They desecrate our home in the name of preserving tradition," she whispered, voice shaking. "Fools." Drake placed a tentative hand on her arm. "Extremists exist in every civilization. The best we can do is stand united against them. Show them they gain nothing by sowing fear." She cast her gaze downward, noticing the comforting gesture of his hand. In that moment, the flame of shared empathy blazed between them, making them forget for a fraction of a second that prying eyes were near. But not everyone was blind to the exchange. A number of Xyrians, including some members of the security forces, observed the subtle contact, the quiet closeness. Whispers sprang up like weeds in a silent field. Thus, the seeds of suspicion were planted. Lyara and Ethan Drake's bond, precarious and hidden, had begun to slip into the realm of rumor and speculation. Over the ensuing weeks, the sabotage emboldened the Council to take a firmer stance in negotiations. Paradoxically, they seemed more inclined to see reason in Earth's overtures, perhaps understanding that forging alliances might strengthen their defenses against internal strife. Slowly but steadily, trade agreements and cultural exchange programs began to crystallize. Drake saw faint glimmers of hope. Perhaps this calamity would at last jolt the Council from their centuries of overcautious slumber. With each step forward, though, the RHYX coalition grew bolder, their threats and propaganda intensifying. Lyara's position, always tenuous among the Xyrian elite, began to fracture. Even some who admired her had grown uneasy at her closeness to the human ambassador. Though they had no indisputable proof, Lyara's father, Councillor Xyr, had started to sense that his daughter was slipping beyond the acceptable boundaries of mere diplomatic courtesy. One evening, after a lengthy session in which the Council debated boosting planetary security measures, Drake returned to his quarters to find a small data crystal left in his private antechamber. Baffled by the unannounced delivery, he inserted it into his personal tablet. A flicker of holographic light, and then Lyara's voice spilled forth. "Ethan, you must be wary. I cannot speak openly at the Council, but I have uncovered evidence that some of the more conservative elders, including certain key influencers behind RHYX, intend to sabotage the final negotiations. They will use you as a scapegoat, claiming you stoked the flames of dissent. Meet me in the West Corridor at midnight. I'll explain more." His stomach clenched. Should he trust the message? Of course. He had come to trust Lyara as he trusted few others. Slipping on a dark coat and ensuring he was not followed by Earth's security detail, Drake slipped into the labyrinth of corridors that spanned the pavilion's western wing. At midnight, the hall stood empty, save for a faint row of glowing crystals along the walls. The hush was absolute, broken only by Drake's footsteps and the thrumming of his pulse. He scanned his surroundings, heart pounding at the prospect that this rendezvous might be watched. Then a shadow emerged from behind an ornate pillar, and Lyara stepped forward. Her hair, bound in a series of intricate braids, caught the gentle phosphorescence. She looked around anxiously, her posture rife with unease. "They're planning to move against you," she said, voice hushed and hurried. "I've read intelligence files that claim RHYX supporters within the Council will accuse you of colluding with these attacks. You'll be imprisoned, or worse." A rush of anger flared inside him. "That's ludicrous. Why would I sabotage negotiations that I came here to uphold?" She shook her head. "People in fear will believe anything. Moreover, a few of the old families resent losing their hold on power. If they remove you from the equation, Earth's interest in Xyros might wither under the scandal, and they can tighten their isolationist grasp." Drake exhaled, hands balling into fists. "Then I should leave, right? Inform Earth's leadership. Request we delay the finalization of these treaties until we can ensure a stable environment." Lyara's gaze flickered. "That's the outcome they want, Ethan. If you abandon the negotiations, it will validate their warnings that humans cause only trouble. It may also dissolve the trust you've painstakingly built with the more moderate council members." He let out a frustrated breath. "So what am I supposed to do?" Lyara gently reached out to touch his shoulder. The simple contact sent shivers along his spine. "Stay," she said gently. "Fight this from within. I will do all I can to protect you. My father still listens to me, for all our differences. I can help quell their accusations." Drake studied her tall, regal form, touched by the quiet desperation in her voice, the way her luminous markings pulsed in anxious patterns. He was struck again by her courage, by her willingness to risk her own standing for him, a being from a foreign planet. They lingered in that corridor, tension thrumming between them. Before caution could chain his actions, Drake slipped his arms around her in a protective embrace. At first, she stiffened. Xyrian etiquette forbade such brazen physical contact, especially in a public space. But after a brief moment, she yielded, resting her head against his shoulder. For a long moment, they stood entwined, uncertain of the future, yet unwilling to give up on their cause, or each other. In the days that followed, their connection deepened and bloomed into a forbidden intimacy. Gone were the tentative touches and half-spoken words. In the secrecy of one of the pavilion's seldom-used towers, they found stolen hours to share their deepest hopes and fears, to love as if they were bound by cosmic fate. It was not lost on them that danger lurked around every corner. Lyara, under her father's roof, was watched by suspicious eyes, her every move analyzed by naysayers who whispered that she was consorting with an off-worlder. Drake, too, sensed the disapproving glances of certain council members. Whispers turned into rumor, rumor turned into quiet condemnation. A tipping point came when an envoy of Earth officials arrived to observe the final steps of the treaty. The council, pressed to finalize terms of trade and cultural exchange, insisted on swift resolution. Meanwhile, RHYX's sabotage escalated. Several more small, symbolic attacks rattled areas around my release, spreading anxiety among the populace. Tensions reached a crescendo during a state dinner. Diplomats from Earth and Xyro rubbed shoulders in a grand banquet hall, its crystalline chandeliers casting rainbow prisms upon the polished floors. Councillor Xyr stood at one end of a massive table, delivering a toast of cautious optimism. Drake, seated near him, sipped from a glass of delicate Xyrian nectar. Yet all pleasantries froze when a council aide, breathless and pale with alarm, rushed into the hall. "Councillors, we have new intelligence," the aide gasped. "RHYX conspirators intend to seize one of our communication spires, broadcast a declaration that the council has surrendered to human infiltration. They claim to have proof that Ambassador Drake conspired with them to orchestrate these attacks as a means to forcibly integrate Xyra into Earth's Federation." An eruption of stunned murmurs seized the room. The Earth delegation looked outraged, Drake most of all. Councillor Xyr frowned, turning his gaze sharply upon Drake, while High Councillor Varek's face sank into grim dismay. "This is absurd," Drake spat, rising to his feet. "I have no part in." Yet before he could finish, the door crashed open again, admitting a small squad of armed Xyrian guards. Their leader, a stern, battle-scarred figure named Commander Teres, stepped forward. "By order of the Council, we place Ambassador Ethan Drake under house arrest pending further investigation." Shock rippled across the banquet. Earth officials clamored, urging calm, demanding explanations. But the guards advanced without hesitation. Drake, though outraged, recognized that resisting would only escalate matters. Lyara, seated at her father's side, rose in alarm, her luminous markings flickering in distress. "This is madness," she cried. "You cannot." But Xyr's paternal eyes flicked from her to Drake, uncertain, torn between paternal love and centuries of tradition. Eventually, his voice emerged, heavy. "Until we ascertain the truth, we must protect the integrity of the council. The ambassador will remain in custody." Liara's face paled as Drake was led away, a swirl of heartbreak and helplessness swirling in her stormy eyes. Confined to a luxurious suite, Drake paced the rooms like a caged panther. Officially, he was held in protective custody, though it felt more like a gilded prison. Armed guards stood at every entrance, and all communications with Earth were strictly monitored or curtailed. The night after his arrest, Lyara managed to bypass the guards. She slipped into his room silently, the folds of her robe fluttering around her tall frame. Finding him leaning by a broad window, she rushed forward, clasping his hands. "Are you all right?" she asked, voice trembling in concern. He sighed, releasing some tension at her presence. "Better now that you're here," he said, though his eyes, ringed with dark circles, betrayed his strain. "The council is reviewing evidence that's obviously fabricated, but I can't prove my innocence if I'm locked in here." Liara's eyes were fierce. "I'm working to clear your name," she told him, voice low. "If we can present the truth, expose the RHYX infiltration among the council, it should exonerate you." He studied the resolute determination in her posture. "You might be risking everything for me," he said softly. your status, your safety. Her gaze did not waver. I cannot stand by and watch them destroy you, or unravel everything we've tried to build together, for our peoples, for each other. He gently touched her cheek, ignoring the fact that in Xyrian culture such an open display of affection, even in private, was considered gravely intimate. I don't deserve your loyalty, he murmured, but I'm grateful. She placed her hand over his. We only do what our hearts command, she replied. In that moment, the tension of the day ebbed away, replaced by an affirmation of their bond. How absurd it seemed, that in a galaxy of wonders and immeasurable distances, the dividing lines of tradition and suspicion could prove so perilous. By dawn, Lyara slipped away, leaving Drake to face another day of captivity. Yet he felt renewed, confident that he was not alone in this trial. Within days, the precarious political situation reached another climax. Intelligence gleaned by moderate council members revealed that the RHYX coalition had planted several sympathizers among high-ranking officials, specifically ones who demanded Drake's arrest. A surge of support for Drake's innocence began to spread among those counselors still open-minded enough to weigh evidence over fear-mongering. However, the RHYX leaders, perceiving their unraveling, resorted to a desperate maneuver, threatening to storm the pavilion itself to force Drake's public condemnation. Whispers carried through the city that an open conflict was looming, pitting the rebellious isolationists against the planet's more progressive faction. On the morning that the council convened to decide Drake's fate, the tension was palpable. The shimmering hallways seemed unnaturally silent, guards stationed at every juncture. Outside, crowds gathered in uneasy clusters, uncertain whether war or peace awaited them. Before the council session began, Lyara managed to find Drake in a back corridor, escorted by Commander Teres, who had grown less hostile under new revelations. You must go, she murmured to Drake, her tone urgent. It's the only way to avoid open conflict. My father is pressing for a compromise that will see you safely return to Earth, where you can continue to advocate for an alliance without fueling strife here. Drake's jaw tensed. But that means they win, he retorted bitterly. They're using fear, and I'll be giving them exactly what they want, my departure. Lyara pressed her hand to his chest, feeling his racing heartbeat. If you stay, war might break out. My people, for all their grandeur, have an old wound from our ancient wars. They fear going down that path again. He studied her face, saw the sorrow etched there. Despite every fiber of his being wanting to remain at her side, to stand and fight, he remembered what had drawn him to her in the first place. Her love for her people, her determination to change things from within. He could not plunge Xyra into conflict for his own pride. Promise me, he said quietly, that you'll keep pushing, that you won't let them close up again once I'm gone. Her eyes shone with unshed tears. I promise, she whispered. Change is already in motion. I'll see it through. Their foreheads briefly touched, a gentle gesture of farewell. Then, with a heavy heart, Drake conceded. The departure was orchestrated swiftly, to forestall any chance of sabotage or ambush. Under the watchful eyes of loyal Xyrian guardians, Drake's diplomatic shuttle was prepared on a secluded platform. Earth's official envoys, incensed over the false charges, had threatened to break all negotiations. Yet High Counselor Varek managed to salvage the talks at the 11th hour, issuing a public statement that the ambassador's departure was voluntary, to ease tensions. When the time came for Drake to board the shuttle, the ramp lowered with a low hiss. He turned once, scanning the small contingent that had come to see him off. Lyara was not among them. Too dangerous for her to appear in public at his side, for it might spark a final outcry from their enemies. He understood, yet part of him ached at leaving without a final embrace. He climbed the ramp, pausing at its top. The swirling winds of the spaceport tugged at his coat, carrying the sense of a world he had come to love in its own strange way. Was this truly the end of his mission here, the end of the bond that had taken root in his very soul? Inside, he settled into the cockpit, the AI's monotone voice enumerating flight checks. His mind drifted to thoughts of Lyara, of the nights in the glowing gardens, of her silver eyes that had looked upon him with the warm promise of the unknown. As the shuttle lifted, soared skyward, and broke through Xyra's atmosphere, Drake felt the weight of heartbreak more than any triumph. He consoled himself with the vow that, one day, he would return, that he would see this mission through to its rightful conclusion. Months slipped by on Earth, though time felt like a slow, unyielding tide of monotony for Drake. Deprived of direct contact with Lyara, he threw himself into the work of forging a stable alliance from afar, lobbying Earth's government to support peaceful overtures toward Xyra. Information arrived in careful drips, gleaned from cryptic official bulletins or secondhand reports. The Xyrian Council had further suppressed the RHYX coalition, foiling several radical plots. High Counselor Varek spoke more openly of forging new interplanetary ties. Counselor Xyr, once so distant, was rumored to be championing an important reform measure. Yet one day, a sealed diplomatic packet arrived, bearing the official crest of Xyros. Within it lay a small data chip, encoded with Lyara's personal cipher. Drake, heart-pounding, inserted it into his terminal. A holographic projection flickered into being, revealing Lyara's image, tall, radiant, yet visibly changed. Her features were softer, her posture protective. She was with child. The rush of emotions slammed into Drake like an electric storm. Disbelief, joy, worry, longing. Her recorded voice spilled out, carefully choosing words in a mix of standard and Xyrian phrases. My beloved Ethan, I do not know if this will bring you comfort or deeper longing. But you deserve to know. Our connection has borne fruit. I am carrying our child, a blessing and a catalyst. Already, the council divides further. Some see this as an abomination, others as a sign that Xyra can move forward at last. I choose to stand in defiance of tradition that labels our child taboo. I will fight for acceptance, for unity, for the dream we've forged together. Whether you can return soon or not, know that I hold your love in my heart, and I promise our child will know who her father is. I hope, one day, you will see her born under Xyra's twin sons. Her image faded, leaving Drake trembling. Tears brimmed in his eyes, the weight of their separation, the enormity of the news, an overwhelming tide. He wasted no time. Mobilizing every connection he possessed, from sympathetic Earth officials to third-party mediators, he began a renewed push to re-engage with Xyra, to ensure that, come what may, he would be there when his daughter entered the world. When the official summons finally arrived nearly 6 months after Drake's departure, the tension was as sharp as a drawn blade. The Xyrian Council, in a move that stunned the entire diplomatic corps, had formally invited him back to witness the birth of his child. They did not phrase it that way publicly, of course. Instead, they claimed it was to finalize negotiations for future cooperation. But Drake knew the truth. Lyara's unwavering courage, her defiance of centuries-old customs, and her father's subtle support had opened a door. Drake's heart pounded when his shuttle touched down on Xyros for the second time. The atmosphere's twin suns bathed the planet in that same golden glow, but this time, the spaceport was neither teeming with suspicious guards nor rife with protesters. Instead, a solemn hush marked his arrival. High Counselor Varek was there to greet him, as was Counselor Xyr, whose expression flickered with conflicting emotions. Yet it was the sight of Lyara, stepping forth with measured dignity, her abdomen rounded in the undeniable shape of impending motherhood, that filled Drake with wonder. She wore a gown that accentuated the gentle glow of her bioluminescent skin, and though she was visibly weary, her eyes gleamed with fierce pride. He descended the ramp, ignoring the formalities of diplomatic greetings. In a bold move, he approached her directly and placed a hand upon her extended belly, tears gathering at the corners of his eyes. Lyara inhaled sharply, pressing one slender hand over his. They did not speak. No words were necessary in that moment, for the entire planet bore witness to this reunion, an event that would echo through Xyrian history. Days later, beneath the luminous crystals of a specially prepared chamber known as the Ancestral Sanctum, Lyara went into labor. Drake, untrained in Xyrian birthing customs, hovered at her side, uncertain yet determined to remain. Xyrian midwives, their skin patterned with specialized medical insignias, administered gentle encouragement and monitored mother and child with advanced scanning crystals. Outside, an anxious gathering of council members and Earth delegates waited in hushed reverence. Rumors circulated that RHYX insurgents might stage an attack to disrupt the birth. but the newly strengthened Xyrian guard had secured the perimeter, ensuring none would threaten this event. The labor was long, punctuated by moments of primal pain and fierce resilience. Lyara clutched Drake's hand, an unorthodox practice in Xyrian tradition, for they typically relied on communal support from female kin. But she insisted that the child's father remain close, bridging the gap between their worlds in that most intimate instant. When finally, amid the glistening glow of Xyros' crystal technology, the child's first cry resounded through the sanctum, Drake felt his heart thunder in his chest. Lyara, sweat-drenched and trembling, exhaled a profound sigh of relief, a tearful grin illuminating her exhausted face. A daughter, Astra. That was the name Lyara had chosen in her private recordings, meaning Star of Hope in Earth's ancient tongues, as well as First Dawn in Xyrian dialect. Even the midwives, accustomed to delivering pure Xyrian newborns, seemed awestruck. The child's skin shone in an azure shade, reminiscent of Earth's sky, while faint swirls of bioluminescent markings traced along her arms and legs. Her face bore a subtle blend of both parents' features, her hair downy and midnight dark, and her eyes, one a stormy gray, the other a shimmering silver, spoke wordlessly of two civilizations intertwined. Drake and Lyara, overcome, could do nothing but cradle the miracle they had wrought. In that moment, all the hate and fear swirling outside the sanctum's walls felt small and distant, overshadowed by the boundless potential an innocent child embodied. Astra's birth altered the fabric of Xyrian society. Many viewed it with shock, even horror, an affront to centuries of pure lineage. Others beheld the child as a living symbol of what unity could accomplish, a harbinger of a future where their race might stand shoulder to shoulder with others in the galaxy. Protests stirred across the city, only to be met by equally vocal demonstrations of support. Articles in the local press, typically reserved in tone, abounded with fervent debate. On Earth, news of the hybrid child captivated the public's imagination, triggering both fascination and a wave of protective support for Drake and his new family. As weeks rolled by, Drake attended council meetings, now wearing two hats, that of ambassador and that of a father. Lyara, though still recovering from childbirth, appeared at crucial sessions, holding Astra. Rather than cower in shame, she boldly exhibited the child, challenging centuries-old taboos. For every counselor who recoiled, another found themselves captivated by the gentle coos of a baby who bore both Xyrian and human DNA. At first, the council remained deeply split. Some demanded the child be classified as a genetic anomaly, unrecognized within Xyrian genealogical records. But the moderate faction, emboldened by High Counselor Varek and a newly resolute Counselor Xyr, pushed a motion declaring Astra a recognized citizen of Xyros, entitled to every right and protection. Weeks stretched into months, and the child thrived, her bright gaze reflecting an uncanny awareness. Drake marveled at her every sign of development. Earth's officials, upon witnessing the unstoppable shift in Xyrian attitudes, renewed their efforts to finalize treaties. Over time, the recalcitrant voices shrank, replaced by pragmatic acceptance that Xyros needed allies, needed fresh perspectives to move beyond old boundaries. Meanwhile, the RHYX coalition, discredited in the eyes of many after repeated failed attacks, slunk into the shadows, its membership fractured. A handful of captured conspirators confessed to fabricating evidence against Drake. Public trust in the extremist faction eroded further, while open-minded Xyrians embraced the idea that perhaps, just perhaps, the universe held more to gain from unity than isolation. Years passed. The once impossible alliance between Earth and Xyros solidified. Diplomatic embassies stood in both worlds, bridging not just commerce and science, but cultural understanding. A steady exchange of scholars, artists, engineers, and explorers sprang forth, breathing new energy into both civilizations. Lyara, long marked as a revolutionary, ascended to a new role of leadership, her vision tempered by the responsibilities of motherhood. Counselor Xyr, though advanced in years, watched his daughter's progress with pride, acknowledging that her bold path had reshaped their planet's destiny. High Counselor Varek saw that caution had its limits, that sometimes true evolution demanded stepping onto precarious ground. As for Ethan Drake, he continued to serve as an ambassador, though not by the rigid definitions once placed upon him. His presence on Xyros was more than an official assignment. It was a calling, fueled by the deep love he bore for Lyara and for the child whose laughter filled their home with radiance. Astra grew swiftly, curious eyes devouring every lesson taught by both Xyrian mentors and Earth instructors. She was equally at ease speaking in the measured cadences of Xyrian or the expressive vernacular of Earth. Her unusual blend of heritage made her a symbol of possibility, beloved by some, scrutinized by others, but always forging forward without fear. On her 18th birthday, she chose to take on a diplomatic role of her own, traveling to a distant star system to negotiate new alliances. Stepping off the shuttle, clad in a simple yet regal outfit that reflected both her mother's luminescent patterns and her father's understated elegance, she was greeted by an honor guard of Xyrian escorts and Earth delegates alike. In that moment, the entire galaxy bore witness to how two hearts, one human, one Xyrian, had forever altered the course of countless worlds. Astra's presence opened doors that had once been thought forever barred, signifying a day when species could not only coexist, but share in the creation of something wondrous and new. When her shuttle door slid open, one official bowed. "Welcome home, Ambassador Astra Monroe," he intoned. Astra smiled, recalling the stories her parents had shared of their early struggles, their stolen glances, their clandestine encounters beneath Xyra's twinned moons. They had dared to break the rules, to challenge fear, to love in defiance of ancient custom, and in doing so, they birthed a union that transcended the boundaries of space and tradition. "It's good to be back," she said softly, stepping onto the welcoming platform. At the end of her path stood Lyara and Drake, side by side, pride shining in their eyes. Behind them, the city of Myralise glowed under the radiant light of the twin suns. A gentle breeze carried the fragrances of a planet that had chosen to embrace change. Astra made her way to her parents, each step echoing the footsteps of those who had walked the road of hope and hardship before her. When she finally reached them, Lyara brushed back a lock of Astra's dark hair, while Drake rested a hand on his daughter's shoulder. The three stood united, a testament to how love, when it breaks past barriers of fear, can reshape destinies, bridging worlds once torn by ignorance. In that golden moment, as father and mother and daughter gazed upon one another, all the struggles, sacrifices, and triumphs that had led to this day crystallized into an undeniable truth. There are no boundaries that love cannot transcend, no heights too daunting for two courageous souls, and no future that remains impossible when hope and unity guide the way. And so, under Xyra's dazzling suns and Earth's watchful eyes across the galaxy, a new era dawned, heralded by the unwavering hearts of a family forged in the stars, and forever defined by the courage of the only man brave enough to love the 8-foot alien goddess. Though countless trials lay behind them, and many more might arise in the endless frontier of the cosmos, they had proven, beyond all doubt, that hope and love could triumph over fear. And, in the end, that promise was more luminous than all the stars combined.